Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I hope that you are all good. In today's video we're going to be doing a acrylic ombre design that was a little bit new to me, so I really hope you all enjoy watching. Starting off, I have got my base tips down and then I've also applied these long stiletto tips and just nipped off the tips of them to change them from stiletto into a kind of like a long tapered square shape. And then I'm going to come in and apply my thin clear acrylic base. So I'm using the Diamond Nail Supplies acrylic system for all of the acrylic and monomer in today's video. I do have a discount code for Diamond Nail Supplies which gets you 10% off. So I'll leave that on screen and in the description box below in case you are thinking of buying from them. Now, I always apply a thin clear acrylic base mostly when I'm working on myself, because I find that clear acrylic adheres the best to the nail plate. And then also it's really handy if you're doing any kind of infill or redesign, you can file back to your thin clear acrylic base, infill that clear area and then come in and do your redesign without having to completely remove the nails. On my practice hand, I do a super thin clear acrylic base because obviously I'm not going to be filing back down to this, and she hasn't got real nails, so she hasn't got to worry about any lifting issues. But I still like to do a really thin clear base because I find my acrylic design work goes over an acrylic base a lot smoother and nicer than over the top of the plastic nail bed tips. And then also it gives me a really nice super smooth surface to work on, because as you can see, I don't really file in my tips that I've applied to what would be the natural nails. So there is a slight ridge where the extension tip meets the nail bed tip. So popping down this thin clear layer just smooths that out. As I said, when I'm working on the practice hand, it is just a super thin clear base. I don't want to waste too much clear acrylic, for example. And it doesn't need a thicker base. Even when I'm working on my own nails, I do keep the thin clear base super thin, but probably just a little bit thicker than this, just so you can file back down without hitting the nail bed or the tip. So I hope that explains that a little bit. I did leave it in because I did get a request for it recently, so I thought I'd try to leave it in at the start of a few videos. So this is what that base looks like, and then we're going to move on to the design. So as I said in the title, this was trying a bit of a new acrylic design for me. I absolutely love any kind of ombre nails, and I've done so many different types of ombres on my channel, but I don't think I've ever done this style of ombre where there is a white in the center and it's kind of ombre over two quite vibrant shades. But I see a set of nails on Instagram and I really liked them. I'm going to try and find them and leave the link to that set in the description box below. I'm pretty sure I did save the set on Insta, but I will have to double check. But basically they had a really vibrant pink shade with glitter down at the cuticle area, which then faded into a soft white acrylic, and then at the tips of the nails they had like a neon vibrant lime green shade. I didn't want to use those particular shades because I didn't have ones that I liked working with in those colors, so I went for different colors but that same technique. And I have to say it was a little bit tricky, especially white always is a little bit harder to blend with vibrant colours for myself anyway. So it was a little bit tricky having to blend it over two different colours. So we're having to blend it down at the cuticle area and then up at the tip area. But let me know what you guys thought of the design. I really loved how fun it was to do because I love any kind of ombre. It was a little bit tricky and there are a few things that I learned along the way, so I'll share them with you as we go. But let's jump into how I did the design. I've started off by taking Diamond Nail Supplies Peacock, which is this beautiful greeny teal shade, and I've just put a wash of this colour down at the cuticle area. This is just down as a base for our glitter and to add a bit of vibrancy. So I've popped that down, thin layer as you see, and then I'm taking a teeny tiny bead of clear acrylic, and this is what I'm going to pick my raw glitter up with. So this particular glitter is from Charlie's Nail Art. I can't remember the name of it, but I'll leave it linked in the description box below. and it has a really fun colour scheme to it. It's got lots of pinks and purples, iridescence and blues, and it worked beautifully, I felt, with the two acrylic colours that I had picked up. So as you can see, it's got some larger, pinker pieces in there, but then it's got lots of the smaller pieces, which makes it great for when you've got to work up at that cuticle area, because you don't want two chunky pieces right on the cuticle line. So what I'm basically doing is picking it up with that wet bead of acrylic, leaving my brush full of monomer, and then nudging those glitter pieces around so that the chunky pieces ain't too close to the cuticle, and so that it fades out nicely as well. Now, as you can see, you can still really see the peacock green shade underneath and coming through this glitter, which is exactly like the design that I see on Instagram, and I really loved the effect that it gave off. It worked really well with a iridescent glitter because that still allows a lot of the color from the acrylic underneath to come through. If you had just a metallic or holographic glitter mix, that would cover up a lot of that color underneath. So if you are recreating this design, I definitely would say go for a glitter mix that has got a fair amount of iridescent pieces in there. I really did like though how this one does have a few of the holographic pink bits in there as well, because they matched with the purple acrylic that I used really well as well. So all I'm doing, trying my best to keep this nice and thin because we don't want to end up with a bulky cuticle area. As I mentioned, I really keep my brush full of monomer. This stops the glitter sticking to your brush and allows you to nudge everything around easily. So I'm able to move those finer glitter pieces around and then pick up any chunkier pieces and place them where I want them to go. And then I just keep nudging everything around until it's all laying nice and smooth, and I've got those chunky pieces exactly where I want them to go. And I did want this to fade down a little bit as well, so there's not a harsh line or where anything ends. So no matter what product I use, you'll see I fade it out, because in any kind of ombre, it makes it a lot easier if everything's got a fade rather than a harsh line where it stops. Then we're going to move on to the colour at the tip of the nails. So I've got Ultraviolet, again from Diamond Nail Supplies, and this is a super pigmented shade, so a little bit goes a really long way. So you'll see that I'm only picking up a really small bead of acrylic, placing it down at the tip of the nail, and then blending it back into that clear acrylic base. The key here, I felt, was a lot of blending, and the little finger was the nail that I did everything first on, so I kind of picked up tips on how to work better as we get through the nails, if that makes sense. Again, I've worked with this colour before, so I knew how pigmented it was, so I knew to work thin with it. So just a small bead, pulling it down to the very tip of the nail, and then I flip my brush in reverse and blend that back. Now, another reason why I only work with small beads of these pigmented colours is because if you apply it nice and thin, further along in the design, if you find that you need to add a little bit more colour, because you've added it nice and thin, you can come in and add a little bit more colour without ending up with a too thick and bulky nail. Another thing about these super pigmented shades, any kind of neons and things like that especially, or blacks, dark reds, they can easily contaminate your monomer. So do make sure that you are really cleaning off your brush before you put it back into your monomer. Otherwise, you'll end up taking a lot of that colour into your monomer. Sometimes you will find that you still do end up clouding your monomer a little bit, but it's okay for all of the design work, in my opinion. What I would just do is switch to clean monomer when it comes to using your clear acrylic and encapsulating. So we're just finishing up applying this purple, and like I said, I kept it all nice and thin. I don't think I do end up coming in at any point and adding any more, because I didn't feel as though it was needed. It's very pigmented, so I didn't have any opacity issues at the very tip of the nail, and then I was fairly happy with how my white ombre went, so I didn't need to come in and touch up anything. I did allow this purple acrylic to fully set before I come in and did the next step. And the reason for that was because if we come in with the white acrylic and the purple acrylic is still wet, it might end up just mixing together a little bit too much and not necessarily creating an ombre. So usually when I'm doing any kind of ombre design, I'll let the first colour set before I come in with the second, and so on and so on. So now we're coming in with the white. Now, to make my life easier, I opted for a soft white rather than a bright white, and the set I did look at, her white acrylic did look fairly soft. It didn't look super bright. It probably looked a little bit brighter than the white I'm using here, but a softer white is a lot easier to work with. So because it was the first time doing a kind of 3-color ombre design with a white acrylic and vibrant colors, I went for a softer shade of white. So this particular white is Silk from Diamond Nail Supplies, and it is absolutely beautiful to work with. It's one of my go-tos when I'm doing any kind of ombre using the Diamond Nail Supply system, just because it's so much easier to work with than a brighter white. I haven't actually tried the brighter white acrylic from Diamond Nail Supplies, but I know some brighter whites can be a little bit trickier to work with because they can be a little bit more on the sticky side. So with this white acrylic, we need it to blend in and over that teal and glitter mix down at the cuticle area, and then we also need it to blend over the purple. And I don't want to cover up too much of either, because I really want you to still be able to see both of those colors in the design. So going through the set of nails, the way I actually found the easiest to do this was to pop a small bead down first of all and kind of blend it back into the glitter, and then take it all the way down as far as I can, and then come in and blend into the ultraviolet, and then come in with another bead of acrylic, but right in the center of the white, and just basically bring a little bit more of the white opacity in, if that makes sense. So not how I'm doing it on this nail. How I did it on this nail I actually found too complicated. So how I do it on the next nail and the pointer finger is how I found it a lot easier. Here I'm kind of coming in with a bigger bead of acrylic, just walking it down the nail, building up the white, and then having to create a ombre at the tip of the nail. And I just found this way too tricky. It's a lot easier, I found, to work with thinner coats at the ombre areas, just because you're ombreing over the brighter colors and you don't want to cover them up too much, and then just coming in with a little bit more white in the middle of the nail. But that's what's really fun about trying new nail designs. You kind of just work out the ways that work best for you as you're going along. Like how one person does it might not be how you end up doing it, or how one person is saying is easy might not be how you end up finding it easy. You'll see here as well, because I was getting in a little bit of a panic, I ended up getting a little bit of white acrylic stuck in my brush there, so I just had to give that a really good clean out. Overall, this is actually not a too hard design if you are comfortable doing ombres. It is just about finding what works best for you and bearing in mind the colors. If I was going to practice doing this, I think I would practice with lighter shades. Obviously, the set I see, she was using very vibrant shades, so I wanted to recreate that look. But if I was practicing this, I would maybe use some pastel shades, because they would ombre a lot easier. So coming on this now, as you can see, I'm blending this acrylic into that glitter mix, and I'm keeping it a lot wetter and a lot thinner than what I did on the previous bead, walking it down a little bit more painting it rather than walking it down. So I'm painting it down and mainly just focusing on the ombre section at the moment. So I'm really blending that in to that glitter mix. We want to have that hidden glitter effect. And then as you can see, I've been able to stretch that bead out enough to start creating an ombre over the ultraviolet as well. Then with my next bead of acrylic, I'm not taking that as far down towards the glitter, because I've already created that fade. I just want to build up the opacity on the white and also create the blend on the purple a little bit more as well. And then lastly, with this bead of acrylic, I'm just slightly blending that back. I'm leaving the bulk of this in that center of the nail where I want the white to look the most pigmented, because that's what I noticed the most about this design. Obviously the white looks the most pigmented in the center of the nail, and because we're using a softer white shade, it's really easy to lose that effect. So I just come in with another small bead, but focus that bead in the center of the nail. And as you can see, by keeping the fade nice and clean at the very tips of the nail, I haven't got to come in with any more of the ultraviolet to touch those up. If you do end up doing the design and find that you've covered up a little bit too much of the purple at the tip, then you could just come back in and paint on a really tiny bit of purple acrylic just to bring the vibrancy back. That is what I do a lot of the time when I'm doing a bright colored ombre tip, but I didn't feel like I needed to in this particular design. So again, we're going to do the same on this now, focusing on blending this back over the glitter. You can see that I've got quite a bit of monomer in my brush, so I can really blend it in over the glitter. If it's easier, you can encapsulate the glitter in a little bit of clear first of all, because then your white will have a more smoother surface to go over the top of. But because we were down at that cuticle area, I didn't want to end up adding too much product and ending up with a too bulky nail or too bulky cuticle area. You got to try and keep everything quite thin when you are encapsulating anything down at that cuticle zone. But this silk acrylic here did make this a lot easier than what I think it would have done or would have been using a brighter acrylic. Anyway, this is what the nail is looking like now that all the design is finished. I did just come here and there with a little bit more white acrylic just in places, and I'm literally painting this on just to make sure that I'm happy with the vibrancy and the coverage. But then now that all of the design work is done, we do need to come in and encapsulate. And I actually did notice encapsulating was a little bit different, because basically the silk is a core powder, so technically that doesn't need to be encapsulated. It's a strength powder, so it's going to create the strength and structure of the nail. And that center part where I've applied the silk happens to be the most product that I've applied. So that area of the nail is already quite thick. So when it comes to encapsulating, I didn't actually want to apply too much clear over the white, because that area was already built up as much as I kind of needed it to be. So when it comes to encapsulating, I'm basically focusing my clear acrylic on that cuticle and apex zone, because we do need to make sure that we're fully encapsulated in that glitter, otherwise it is going to file off. And then I also need to make sure I'm encapsulating from the fade and the ultraviolet zone, because they are very, very thin, and we wouldn't, if you was wearing this, that would easily snap because there's no structure or thickness. So you'll see when I'm applying my clear acrylic, I'm focusing the thickness of the clear in those areas and kind of more just blending the clear over the white areas, just because they didn't actually need encapsulating too much. I do only show encapsulating on the two middle nails because I didn't want to bore you all, as this video was already a lot longer than I expected it to be. But I'm just making sure here that I've got clean monomer and I'm working nice and kind of more on the medium to wet side with the encapsulation layer, just so I haven't got to play around with that clear acrylic too much, because the more you play around with your clear acrylic, the more you end up putting bubbles in it. And this was where I was struggling a little bit, because I just had no thickness on the tip of the nail, so I had to come in with a little bit more clear acrylic just to build that up, because the tips were super thin where I'd worked with that ultraviolet so thin. So just bear that in mind when you're doing any kind of encapsulation. Of course you need to focus on encapsulating in the glitter and the design, but you also need to focus on building up your strength and structure. So onto this one, you'll see I'm placing that bead of clear down, kind of blending it back over the white. I do want some clear over the white, but I'm pushing and pulling the bulk of that bead of acrylic down towards the very tip of the nail, because that's where we want that thickness to be. I'm also brushing over it quite a lot as well, just to make sure everything's nice and smooth, everything's nice and even, as then this is going to leave us with less finish filing to do. And then I do just come in with a really small bead at the tip of the nail and blend that back, just to make sure that there is enough thickness there, because I do like to come in and file and refine the shape, and I find this a lot easier to do if I have got a decent amount of acrylic down. I'm not talking decent as in too thick and bulky, but enough so that I know I can file a nice shape. And then just coming in again with a small bead of acrylic down at that cuticle area to fully encapsulate in that glitter and just build up the apex a little bit more. Now off camera I did finish off all of the encapsulation, and then I did all of the filing and buffing, so this is what the nails are looking like. I did brush off a majority of the dust, but I do always like to wipe over the nails with a little bit of either acetone or alcohol, and I really love these Kiki London alcohol pads just because they come with alcohol already applied to them, so they're super easy to just come in and clean up the nails with. And then I'm also going to be using the Kiki London No Wipe top coat to finish off and top coat these nails. I love this top coat because it's got a really nice thin consistency to it, but it also has a beautiful high shine as well. So I'm just going to apply a thin layer of this to all of the nails. And it was annoying, even though I gave these nails a really good dust and wiped over them with alcohol, I still kept finding little bits of dust. And that is one of the downsides to working on the practice hands. The dust just clings to the silicone, and then when it comes to top coating, you'll find that you end up finding a little bit of dust that's flicked off of the hand onto the nails. Much easier working on a person or your own nails. But as you can see, I'm just coming in and applying that top coat. I do have to go over a few times just to try and remove any loose little bits of dust like I see there. And then once I have finished applying this top coat, I'm going to pop it in to cure for 30 seconds in my LED lamp. If you're using a UV lamp, you will need to cure this one for 2 minutes. Lastly, as we are coming towards the very end of what feels like a super long video, I do want to apologise for the lack of videos. It was the Easter holidays and I knew that I wouldn't get around to doing as many videos. I tried to get 1 or 2 up a week, but I just knew that during the holidays that was going to be tricky. And then into the second week of the holidays, my little one got chickenpox, and that just completely halted any kind of nails for me because it was just really difficult because she wasn't feeling very well. And then also it just limited the amount of things we could do because obviously you can't go out really when you've got chickenpox, so we were just stuck at home, so it was harder to keep her entertained. So that's why there was the lack of videos. I did still upload over on the Kiki London channel, so do always check that out if you're looking for any builder gel or gel polish videos. But guys, this was the finished result. Do let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. It's definitely a design that I'll be trying again. I really loved it, but do let me know your thoughts and opinions. I hope you're all keeping safe and well, and I hope you all had a wonderful Easter break. Thank you all so much for watching. Lots of love. Take care. Bye bye.